Hello, hello. Happy Friday. So, we are going to get started in about a minute or so with our session 4 of managing up. And today we're going to be focusing on the very important area of building trust and influence without authority. And so as we get into it, and we start to work through this mind shift of understanding the power that we have in the workforce, regardless of title or disposition, that's when we really start to be masterful at managing up. And so with that said, I'll go ahead and get us going because our webinar is short and sweet. So if you haven't met me before, I'm Dr. Myra Austin. I'm the CEO and founder of Management Cues. Management Cues is a very unique organization. We provide scientifically backed and proven training, a unique concept, unique type of experience in training. But we definitely focus on having results and creating an experience for our managers out there, part of which stems from my experience in operations and seeing so many managers struggle through their career, or have barriers that go unaddressed, with inadequate training or support. So with that said, we'll jump right into it. So thanks again for joining us. Today's going to be a really good one. And it's going to focus on elevating the way that we see influence, the way that we navigate it, and how we address the concept of trust in the workplace. So we're going to focus on a little bit of the psychology with navigating and managing through upward type of relationships, which means the relationship between you and the person above you or the person that you report to. We're going to talk about authority versus influence. We'll touch on the neuroscience aspect of it. Neuroscience is such a big part of what we do in terms of assessing whether we are creating the right response in our training audience, and if our managers are actually experiencing changes and enlightenment as they're working with us. That's a big part of what we care about. We're going to talk about how to build influence, and really move away from having title hold you back, which happens to be a very common thing in the workplace. Not only have I experienced it myself as a growing professional, but I've seen it, I've observed it, and in training with our clients, it's very present. And so I'll speak to some examples of that. And we have a great audience today, so feel free to share your experiences, examples, and questions as well. With that said, feel free to comment, unmute, raise your hand. This is Friday. Let's have a little fun with it. We made it. I know it was quite a week for me. I'm sure it's been a week for everybody as well. Okay, so let's get into it. So the psychology of trust in upward relationships is important to distinguish from other relationships. The reason it's so important is because sometimes just the fact that we are reporting up or into somebody creates a different type of either nervousness, anxiety, maybe insecurity. There's all kinds of dynamics that take place with an upward relationship that may not take place with a relationship across the organization or with a colleague that's in the same role that you're in, right? It's a different thing. And so the first part is recognizing that there is a difference. It does play a role in your mind, and it may limit some of the actions you take, right? So gaining some awareness around that puts you in a different place in terms of mindset. So consistency and reliability. When we follow through on promises, when we show that we have predictable behavior and we maintain steady values, trust is reinforced. So the reason why that's important is because we have to acknowledge that when we are unpredictable, when we are inconsistent, or if our values aren't being displayed or we're not transparent about our values, we're actually breaking down trust with the person we report to. And I think that's important because it requires self-awareness. Sometimes we don't do it consciously, sometimes it's happening subconsciously. And so that awareness is important. Transparency. So openness in communication, especially during change and conflict, is what fosters upward trust. So the reason why that is so challenging is because we tend to hold back when we're in a situation of conflict or when we're dealing with change that makes us uncomfortable. So keep that in mind. We naturally actually step back instead of step forward. And that's why it requires practice. But just know that when we step back and we don't step into our genuine self in moments of conflict or change, we're again breaking down trust. Integrity and ethics. So trust builds when we act with honesty, fairness, and moral judgment. So this is something that we play out, right? Where our values become life when they become real and they become known. And so similar to what I've just mentioned, we tend to step back in these moments where we should be clear, firm, and speak to our own morality in situations. Supportiveness. Professionals who advocate for their teams, listen actively, and provide resources are seen as more trustworthy. So standing up for your team, while it may be difficult, while it may feel confrontational or maybe even come off confrontational, actually does something to the person across the way. So just figuring out what the right balance is and how to do it with tact, that's the key to that. Not necessarily not doing it anymore, right? Which can happen if you get a slap of the hand, right? So if when we're being honest or when we're being assertive or when we're advocating, we are told we are being too aggressive or we are told that we took it too far, we tend to pull all the way back instead of master it and become better at it. So these are the types of things that limit the trust and influence in an upward relationship. And so it's important to be aware in those moments. Psychological safety. So trust deepens when people feel safe to express their concerns. And yes, this is also your boss or your leader expressing and feeling safety around you when they tell you something about them or about you. And so we forget sometimes when we report up that they're human beings in the moment too, and they need psychological safety from us as much as we need it from them. And again, that's critical self-awareness in those moments that maybe even though the moment is difficult, the psychological safety needed is for them, not you in that moment, right? So it's recognizing when those moments take place and cultural sensitivity. That's awareness and respect of the cultural values and communication styles that influence trust, right? How do people perceive trust across cultures? Because we have norms, we have different things that maybe define trust in different ways. And so being curious about that is what allows you to kind of flex that muscle. So authority and influence. So this is one of the key components that I love to dive into with managers because being in management, you're in a position of authority. So recognizing that authority plays a role in the dynamics, that authority plays a role in how you're perceived, authority plays a role in how that upward relationship gets formed. It's just there. It's part of the component. And so influence is completely separate from that. So it's separating those two as managers, as professionals, and making that distinction. So align your goals with your manager's strategic objectives. So that's a common theme across all 4 of our sessions, because unless you really get to know your boss or your leader, you're not able to create this alignment, enhance the influence, and continue to labor the trust. So know when and how to approach those in authority and avoid emotionally charged and poorly timed conversations. So that really means when you're having a conversation with your boss, if you or your boss is getting charged up, it's stepping into it and saying, we have to pause this because we need some time to process how we're feeling about it. That doesn't require authority. It requires awareness, and it requires a little bit of courage to be able to step into that. Be concise and data driven and tailored to how your leader processes information, not how you process it. In managing up, it's all about the person on the other end and you being self-aware enough to know how to create that dynamic, how to build that bridge. Influence grows when you reliably deliver results and demonstrate insight beyond your role, right? So it's understanding what results are expected or would be preferred, right? So make that distinction in your role, in your environment, and then demonstrate that you can sync it up to their goals and to the overall direction the organization is moving in. That's what this means. Read the room. It's so important to practice reading the room and understanding if you're being timely and if your body is in tune with what is happening at that time. So you have to kind of step outside yourself a little bit and not be consumed by whatever's happening in the room in order to do this. And so it's recognizing the cues, right? So the word in management cues is so critical because I really felt like in my career, the cues weren't there until I started to realize that's the guidance we were lacking, the absence of cues of when to step into things. So these are some of them. Know when to push boundaries. It's important to step up. It's important to advocate. It's important to know when to push and when to follow protocol to maintain credibility, right? So it's that fine dance of knowing how to navigate these things and then shift from being a task doer to a trusted contributor with perspective. So again, through this mini webinar, I've posed questions for us to ask ourselves, right? Or maybe even ask your colleagues. Am I a trusted contributor is a great question to ask yourself and your colleagues, because then you can start to dialogue about what makes a trusted contributor trusted. And we have Marisa chiming in. Feel free to unmute yourself, Marisa. I love your comments. I'll read it and then I'll let you kind of comment. But Marisa said, not only do we need cues, we need to look for those cues and initiate cues. Yeah, cues are incredibly important is the reality. But go ahead, speak your mind.
Yeah, I mean, it part of managing up is taking the initiative, right? We can't just wait for the cue. We need to help manage the cues and no pun intended, and not only manage those cues, but actually initiate them, right? If we want to manage up and if we want to take control of who we are, what we're doing, and the career we want. So that's been my lesson.
Oh, absolutely. And I think here's I think the secret sauce, right? Is do you know how to recognize the cues? Do you know how to design cues? Because these are the things that lend to mastery in managing up and in management and leadership, ultimately, in my opinion. Because
Yeah, and
guess,
yeah,
you know,
it's also part of the School of Hard Knocks, Dr. Myra.
oh, yeah. You have to be able to recognize these things. And in order to recognize them, you have to be paying attention. So I think it starts to paying attention to self. I think self-awareness helps you understand your own cues, what you respond to, your triggers. And then once you're able to start doing that, you're able to see it in everybody else. And for me, it's been a uniting force, not a dividing force. I've been able to recognize the humanity that takes place in the workforce and not take it so personal, because ultimately I realized it's really not all about me. As hard as that is, it's not. People are in their space and time experiencing all kinds of things. So here's the neuroscience of it. So apart from this psychological component of trust and influence, there's the neuroscience, the physical part, the reactivity, the chemical combustion. And I get really excited about it because I think there's certain aspects of who we are and what happens in the workplace that we can't fight, that are just, we're wired a certain way. And so it's acknowledging that. So the oxytocin release. So when we're experiencing trust, the brain's oxytocin system activates. And I've mentioned this before in a prior webinar, but that's called the bonding hormone. Okay. And it's amazing to think that we are so amazingly created and designed that we have a hormone dedicated to bonding. Like, if that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what will, but it promotes connection and feelings of safety. And the more trust is built, the more oxytocin is released. That's what strengthens our relationships. So we're meant to have these dynamic relationships. We're meant to navigate these journeys. The prefrontal cortex activation goes into mode when we trust someone and we start to create decision-making processes around it and social behavior. That means that we're becoming engaged. So that supports healthy interactions and collaboration. And then there's cortisol. So cortisol plays a role too. Trust reduces the body's stress hormone, the cortisol levels, leading to lower anxiety and greater psychological safety in interactions. So there's no coincidences. I always say, I'm a bit cynical by nature, but I really don't believe in coincidences. And in our training experiences, the reason our participants feel the way that they do is because we care about the cortisol reduction, and we include that in our approach and methodology and execution. It's meant to put you in a place where you're trusting, because that's when you're going to be more open to retaining and learning, right? So again, no coincidences here. But building influence through value. So the next few slides, if you're going to take anything home and put it to work today, the next few slides to me are the most powerful. So make sure you guys comment in chat if you agree or disagree. I love a little contention in any and all training. So building influence through value. So how we build influence upward is completely strategic. Right? So solve real problems, identify pain points, and offer actionable solutions. People trust and follow those who make their work easier. It's just that linear. Anticipate needs, show initiative by thinking ahead, preparing what others didn't know they needed yet. That requires you being super aware of how they work. Bring insight, not just information. There's a difference. Anybody can bring information to the table. Is it insightful? Is it timely? Is it going to move the needle? Right? Interpret data, trends, and patterns to help your team or leader make smarter decisions. Are you empowering people through your information, or are you just pointing out that they're wrong? Because that's not going to help you build trust. Providing relational value. Support others' success. Be the person who helps others shine. This builds trust and reciprocal influence. This is not brown nosing. This is creating value. Be dependable and consistent. People gravitate towards those that they can rely on to follow through, especially under pressure. If you break easily under pressure, if you get flustered, if you become part of the noise, chances are subconsciously you're not considered dependable or consistent, because again, we're wired a certain way. Create psychological safety. Influence increases when others feel safe to express ideas or ask for help around you. That means your constructive feedback muscle has to be solid for people to feel safe around you with how you receive information and how you provide it, right? So it's both. Visibility and credibility. And this is one that comes up quite often with middle management, entry to middle management, but I see it as a theme in middle management. Show, don't just tell. Influence grows when you let your results speak through impact, not self-promotion. Speak the language of the business. Frame your ideas in terms of business goals, KPIs, and outcomes. I see goals and KPIs often. Outcomes are not always so clearly defined, because I've seen managers interpret outcomes as fulfillment of KPIs. It's separate. It's different. So build cross-functional knowledge. Being valuable across departments makes you more influential across the organization. Continuous value creation. This is a level up, right? The continuous value creation is you seeing past your particular role or your completion of tasks or projects. So keep learning, stay relevant by upskilling, reskilling, and being the go-to for emerging knowledge. The key there is emerging knowledge. Are you up on game on the emerging leadership and management knowledge? Are you going to be able to support your leader make better management and leadership decisions? Or are you just focused on what you do, right? And that's how the extent of continuous value and value creation is born. Innovate processes, suggest better ways of working that save time, reduce costs, or improve quality. And my recommendation is that you write these three things down, because if you're not doing and contributing in that way, you're not creating continuous value creation, right? So that's save time, reduce cost, and improve quality. Those three things, they're very much operationally centered. But if you're not doing that, there's no continuity to the value that you're creating. Share generously. Knowledge sharing builds influence because it shows generosity without ego. If you learn something at this webinar that you know is going to be of value to your environment, share it, right? That's creating continuous value creation, right? Instead of keeping it for yourself. And we do that often. We find something good, we want to master it. We think in terms of self-preservation, which, by the way, is also a natural reaction. Relationship mapping. So I'm going to give you guys a tool today because I just appreciate you so much. And I'm so happy that you've joined. We're going to talk about relationship mapping. If you've never seen this before, it's an excellent tool. Marisa, I'd love to hear after I go these slides what your thoughts are on this. But relationship mapping is the process of charting out the formal and informal relationships between stakeholders to gain insights into power dynamics, influence patterns, and communication flows, helping you navigate relationships more effectively, especially when managing up or across teams. So I'd love to hear in chat, have you done this type of relationship mapping in your environment? Give me a quick yes or no. And then I'm going to do one more slide, Marisa, and then I'd love to get your insights.
Yes.
Yeah, and Julie said one of the reasons she's here in training. I love it. She's ready to share and create continuous value. Excellent. So what a relationship map typically includes. So if you've never done it, try this. This is a tool you can use immediately, and it's a great team experience. It includes the names and roles of key stakeholders. It includes the levels of influence and decision-making power. Okay, keep in mind, this is focusing on influence and who's making what decisions. Type of relationship. Is it supportive? Is it neutral? Is it resistant? It requires a degree of honesty, but this can help you change the entire dynamic of your team. The strength of the connection between the stakeholders. Is it strong? Is it weak? Is it growing? The communication preferences or behavioral patterns. Okay, so this is looking at the dynamics within a team. So I'm going to quickly go through this example, and then I'll bounce it to you, Marisa, as an amazing, HR executive and very experienced in these areas. This is an example, and I'm including it in your deck because you can remake it on your own, but very clear, right? This is account-based relationship mapping. You start to define and understand who's a supporter, who's neutral, who's blocker, who doesn't have a relationship with you, right? And this helps you be strategic and manage up, but also across. So if we're not looking at our relationships, we shouldn't be assuming that they're intact, right? We shouldn't be assuming that they're functional versus dysfunctional. We shouldn't be assuming that because we're in specific roles, we're going to work well together. Mm-hmm. Guess what? It's just not that easy. So, Marisa, let me know. What are your thoughts on these last three slides?
Yeah, so these are reminiscent of stakeholder analysis, right? Mm-hmm. Different terminology, same concept. And that, oh my goodness, and my phone's going off. And the whole purpose there in when I started doing stakeholder analysis was really to define what are the pieces of communication, what are the messages that my different stakeholders need, what are the different messages I need to be sharing with them, right? And so this takes it just a step deeper. Yes. Right. And this is a very quick and easy way to look at a relationship and determine, hey, what can I do to build this relationship? Is it a relationship I want to build? Is it necessary for me to build? Why do I want to build it, etc.?
Excellent. Yeah. So if you see what she did there, which she does so often, right? She's saying we take it at the organizational level, and we do this. The reason it's so commonly done at the organizational level is because the focus is strategy. Mm-hmm. But we don't tend to take strategy down to a more intimate level.
Yeah, to the personal level. Yep.
Right? Even though strategy is so needed. We need strategy even in our personal relationships. I need strategy with my husband because, and we have to know that there's layers to how we engage,
Mhm.
right? There's a dynamic to be mastered because we're people and we're different. It's just that simple.
Yep.
So thank you. Thank you, Marisa, for that. Anything to add before I move on?
Nope. Go right ahead. You're killing
All
it.
right. Ah, thank you. All right, excellent job. I love your input, and feel free if anybody else wants to add. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Julie. Julie says she loves this. Okay, so boundaries in the workplace when managing up. So we can't pretend that there are no boundaries when managing up, when talking to your boss, when engaging, right? There are. And these are the boundaries we should be aware of. And here's how we need to navigate through them. So time and availability. Protect focus time. Block out time for deep work. Don't over accommodate last minute demands. That actually works against your managing up strategy because sustaining that boundary actually makes you more respected, not less, right? Respect off hours or out of office hours, right? Set expectations for email or messaging outside of work hours. Model it in return. Again, you're setting the stage with boundaries. Boundaries communicate respect. Boundaries communicate integrity. Boundaries communicate positive things, but sometimes we're very uncomfortable because we're focusing the relationship based on authority.
Boundaries.
Workload.
Hey. Boundaries communicate professionalism, Dr. Myra.
Absolutely. And that's all encompassed in those
Yep.
perceptions. It also does quite a bit of work in our subconscious.
Yes, it
Um,
does.
yeah, I agree with you. Workload and scope. Clarify your role. Don't take on tasks outside your responsibilities without discussing capacity and priorities. Hold the line. It's important, right? Respect your time, your value, your contribution. Others will follow, right? Push back thoughtfully, right? That doesn't mean you shove back. That means you're pushing back thoughtfully. If overloaded, say, I'd be glad to help. Here's what I'm currently working on. What should take priority? Use that critical analysis muscle. Don't just accept it. You're not an ox, right? You're somebody who's contributing value, and your time is just as important as anybody else's, right? So you got to elevate that feeling. Communication and communication boundaries. Be honest, not overexposed. There's a difference. Share relevant feedback or updates without over disclosing or oversharing. So think about that. In my exchanges, am I oversharing? In my effort to try to be transparent, there's a balance of what's needed in the workplace and in the relationship. Make sure you know how to define that. Manage tone and frequency. Keep it professional. Avoid venting upward or using passive aggressive cues. Okay, so until you develop a really good, solid base for trust and influence, you want to manage how you vent, right? First, make sure it is psychologically safe. Don't just, in an effort to try to connect, sometimes we let loose too much, but that's not what creates the connection. Emotional labor. Stay grounded. You're not your manager's therapist or emotional buffer. So check that part, right? In trying to build a relationship, are you guys using each other appropriately, or did it become an inappropriate relationship and you didn't realize it? Offer empathy, but protect your emotional bandwidth. Don't absorb their strength, your stress. If you're managing up, you can't be absorbing the strength. You're a vehicle to which to mitigate these things, right? So there's a start and a stopping point there. Practice detachment with care. Support their success without carrying their burdens. So I'm going to ask you, are you carrying their burdens? Because then you're not successfully managing up. That's not how that works, right? Values and ethics. Stand firm on integrity. If you're asked to do something that feels unethical or misaligned with company policy, raise the concern appropriately. Know your non-negotiables. What are you a non-negotiable on? I know what mine are. I have 5 non-negotiables at all time. Have you spent time thinking about yours? Because if you haven't, you're not setting healthy boundaries and you're not going to be able to manage up and hold the line. Understand what lines you won't cross and be prepared to reinforce them respectfully. Because when we don't do that, we end up trying to uphold our boundary in an aggressive and sometimes emotionally charged way, right? And so it derails everything at that point. It's a very fine dance, and we often miss the boat on these. So assertiveness without conflict. So as somebody who's naturally very assertive, very dominant style communicator, you name it, I'm probably on that opposite end, right? So use assertive, not aggressive communication. Assertive communication is clear, respectful, and direct. So for example, here's what I need to complete this project on time. Aggressive is demanding, forceful, and blaming. You never give me enough time. So even if you're saying it jokingly, check yourself because you're actually being aggressive, right? So there's a distinction there. Frame assertiveness as a partnership. People get scared of us when we come on strong. That's something I had to learn the hard way. And so you have to be able to manage it. Position your input as part of a shared goal. To hit the target you set, I'll need X. Here's how we can make it happen. That framing, so priceless. Use neutral, non-confrontational language. When we're dominant communicators, when we have those types of extrovert type of personalities, we use confrontational language because it doesn't feel confrontational to us. It feels quite normal, right? So we have to recognize that. Replace you statements with I or solution focused phrases. I want to make sure we're aligned instead of you didn't clarify. Be prepared with data or context. Ground your assertiveness in facts, not feelings. Because again, we're naturally dominant. We're naturally maybe loud. We're naturally maybe largely extroverted, which I could probably check all three of those boxes, right? You have to realize that when you put things into context, it helps you manage your own feelings around something and not come off as emotional. So ground your assertiveness in facts, not feelings. Based on the current workload and deadlines, here's the realistic timeline, right? Help yourself out. So set boundaries as expectations, not ultimatums. In order to maintain quality, I'll need to shift X to next week. Is that okay with you? When you ask people a question, they feel like they're in control and not like you are being controlling. Such a sweet dance. I can't even tell you how long it took me to learn these lessons, but they're priceless. Time it right. Choose moments when your manager is most receptive. Avoid catching them in the middle of a crisis or back-to-back meetings. So I will tell you, I know we're at time. We're going to run a little bit over. It's important for you to make it about them and not about you. Mirror the communication style. If your manager prefers bullet points, don't give them a long story. If they like big picture thinking, start there before details. Stay calm under pressure. When tension rises, keep your tone steady and stay anchored in your intent, not your emotions. Clarify mutual goals. Focus on shared outcomes. We both want this launch to go well. I believe adjusting the timeline will get us there with fewer risks. And assertiveness continued without, I think we already did this one. Okay, so reflection. Reflection helps you understand how your actions, tone, and timing affect your manager and your team. Taking the time to reflect is such a powerful strategy, and we have to treat it as a strategy. So by processing your emotional triggers and assumptions, you can respond intentionally, not reactively. Reflecting on past interactions actually helps you fine-tune your message delivery, word choice, and listening skills for future conversations. So reflections and journaling actually has a higher impact on your practice in learning and retention for managing up. So I really suggest if you don't have a journal that you get one. So here are our key takeaways for today. Understand and align with your manager's goals. Communicate proactively and transparently. Practice strategic self-awareness. Deliver value beyond your job description. Set boundaries and respect and assertiveness. and take time to reflect routinely and use a tool to anchor it. If you're not using a tool to anchor your strategies that we've mentioned today, you're going to limit your attention, but also you're not going to be able to fine tune it as quickly. So make sure that you do that. So I know we're short on time. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I'll try my best to answer them, but I'll go ahead and wrap us up for today. So training and support resources, you're going to get a copy of this webinar deck. We have training programs online and all kinds of new offerings this year. Neuroscience studies you could check out. And I'm actually extending a 20% management reflection journal discount for you guys using code MANAGEUP. I think the journal itself is like between $10 and $12. So great discount for that. And then last but certainly not least, we're running our I Fund Women by Honeycomb Credit crowdfunding campaign to scale management queues right now. So if you haven't checked it out, please do. Amazing organization who's backing up our growth and I'm super excited about. So check that out. And next week, we're on our last session. So I hope you've enjoyed this 5-week mini series. We're going to be talking about navigating performance management from a managing up perspective. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us. I hope this was helpful. I will be sending the recording and the deck to you. And thank you so much. I'll see you guys for the last session next week.